Hi, my name is Tabitha Hall, and this is going to be my oral presentation for my policing project. I am going to apologize. It looks like there's a little bit of glare on my screen, so it may be hard to see some of the slides, but I'm hoping it's going to be okay. So the first question was to explain the organizational structure of a typical police department that I chose to follow. So I chose to follow the organization structure in the textbook to the small to medium sized police department, as there is only 51 people, including myself, in it. Starting with a standard chain of command with a chief of police. And then I decided for each section, for each of the colonies, to do a lieutenant that would be in charge and a sergeant for each of them. So again, there would be 2 lieutenants and 2 sergeants. Each would have jurisdiction over one section or the other. And then in the department, there would be 5 investigators. With the first colony, it sounded like there was more crimes against people. So I was going to direct 3 investigators towards that section, and then 2 investigators towards the residential area that saw more crimes against property. And then the rest of the staff in the department would be patrol officers, and then I'll go over how I plan to do that as well. So I decided to split the patrol officers into 2 groups, just like I did for the lieutenant and the sergeants for each section. The reason being it would be easier to control the policing methods, as I did choose 2 different policing methods, one for the one section and one for the other, which I will go over later. So most of the patrol officers would be patrolling by car. And then I did add in that there would be some patrol officers on foot or on horse, and that would be mainly in the second section, which would be the residential, the one that saw more crimes against property. And then both of the colonies would have canine units that could assist in the officers in making arrests and searches. So I did just make a little diagram. I'm not sure if you can see, it has white lettering, starting with the police chief at the top, and then again splitting the colonies into 2 sections. So this would be the industrial, having a lieutenant, sergeant, and then patrol officers and investigators. And then the second colony, which was the residential, would have the same setup. So the second question was to explain the role of public policing as an institution of social control and how you will address crime as a societal issue. So I just briefly summarized how social control has been used to the goal to ensuring order within the society and the laws that need to be followed and punishing those who break those laws. We've seen policing, and I mean, even hundreds of years ago, the punishment when you didn't follow the moral codes or the laws set in place, and how we've developed over time. Back then it was more geared towards punishing the people who didn't obey, versus now it's more rehabilitating offenders. So the third question was to explain how you're going to achieve social control using methods such as law enforcement, community policing, problem-solving policing, and or order maintenance. So I did write that I would control it as very similar to how we do here in the US. There would be laws that everyone would have to follow there on the moon. Except for the fact that the laws would be the same throughout both colonies, as in the US it does differ by state, and then we have federal laws that kind of overlap each other, and the lines can get a little blurry. It would be very clean cut, as it does look like it would be a smaller population and maybe easier to maintain control. I would allow the offenders to have the right to have a trial, just like we have here amongst their peers. I would direct more efforts to rehabilitation. to allow offenders to redeem themselves and be a productive member on the moon. Again, the population, it seems like it would be very, very small, having only 2 colonies. So of course we don't want to lock away everybody, because then there would be no one left. So I would definitely direct the social control more of rehabilitation and the aspect of like community service and whatnot. So earlier I did state how I was going to split the 2 colonies and have different policing methods, so I'll go over that. In the first section, that's primary industrial, I was going to use a problem-solving police method to achieve social control. So I was going to use this mainly because it could work in determining crime-causing problems. With that area seeing a lot of crime against people, we want to figure out where that's coming from and seeing if we can prevent it. Also implementing more routine patrols in the area, trying to deter people from committing crimes. In the second section that is primarily residential and sees more crimes against property, I did choose to go with community policing to achieve social control. I think with the use of community policing and having officers not only in cars, but on foot and on horses, and maybe having like school resource officers or DARE officers, that we could build a trust with the community, and hopefully that would help keep the community safe, as well as overflow into the industrial area as well. If we have more people speaking up, the officers can help more and try and deter crime and solve it a little easier. So the next question was to explain contemporary issues such as concerns and future challenges of policing. So there was quite a few, so I kind of just touched base on I think some of the most important ones that we see more often, and that are kind of all over the headlines and they're all over the media and whatnot. So there's use of force, accountability, and mental health crisis. So we see use of force a lot when officers have to use deadly force, and a lot of times people don't agree with them. And accountability, making sure that the officers are held accountable if they do something that they shouldn't have been doing. And then mental health crisis, we see a lot of people that do have mental illnesses, and we kind of lack the resources to provide them with the kind of help that they need. So the next question was to describe the various strategies employed by law enforcement to address contemporary issues facing policing today. So I just went over a few of them. A lot of departments have issued body cameras that the officers each have to wear. This will hold them accountable for their actions, as well as the rules and regulations of use of force. So typically, if you have to use some type of force, you do have to notify your superior or prove why you have to use that type of force. So those are kind of like the rules that I'm talking about. And then a lot of departments are putting funding into mental health training for their officers, or hiring people that are certified in order to deal with those types of situations and try and de-escalate them, so that the officers who aren't trained in that aspect don't have to intervene. And then the last slide just goes over the sources that I used. I did only find 3 sources because I was having a hard time finding sources that were actually reliable. Most of my information did come from the policing textbook, as far as like the policing methods and the organizational structure that I chose to go with. And then I did find a few other ones, but like I said, it was kind of hard, especially when you're searching for issues with the policing. I just had so much stuff coming up, but I was able to find 3 academic sources, which was good. All right, and that is my presentation.